Bonjour, 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 mes amis. Hello, and welcome to this afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from, our webinar today. We are so very excited to be here today to be talking to you about all things gut and then indirectly poop, because it's going to come up a lot, so we might as well say it from the top of the hour. Good evening, Dr. Varden. How are you?
Well, good evening. It is a pleasure to be here. I am doing wonderfully. How are you doing?
Good. I'm doing good. For those who are in the audience and caught us last night, everyone knows I'm traveling. I'm currently in California. And while it's maybe not as warm as I would hope it to be, it is warmer than my homeland of Toronto, which is frigid and cold and will remain so for many months to be. So I'm doing good. Yeah. Yeah, and
Wonderful.
we have some very exciting content for you this evening, and also just as a little bit of a teaser for those in the audience. Just before we get to Q&A, we're going to be announcing a little bit of a wait list for something that is very relevant to this evening's topic, to some new and, in my opinion, some very exciting testing when it comes to the gut biome. So hold on. It's a little bit of a tease to keep you at least a little bit longer. So Dr. Varden, where do you want to start this evening? How are we going to approach this idea of gut health, its implications? We know it's all important. Maybe we start off there. Why gut health is important before we dig more into how on earth do you keep your gut good and healthy? What can we leverage to know how to best treat our gut? So why do we care about it? What are we doing good for our gut?
Well, I'll tell you, there is so much going on in our gut.
Mm.
And I believe it was either Socrates or Hippocrates who said all disease starts in the gut.
Mm.
And, maybe not all, but that is pretty darn close because when we get back to it, when we really start diving deeper into the issues that people have, when you look at the root causes, a lot of it is gut
Mhm.
based because I tell my clients, we are not what we eat, we are what our gut biome breaks down and allows us to absorb. And
Mhm.
all of, anything we take in,
Yeah.
really what it comes down to, it is information. It's
Yeah.
information. It's information for our bodies, for our tissues, for our cells, for which genes are going to be expressed, for what's going to be happening next, for, all of these amazing, wonderful things. So our gut biome and the critters that are in there, the diversity, the population, very important. Who's running the show? Who's got more influence? So, we really need to highlight and respect how much our gut affects our whole body. And something that we are going to get into a little bit is the gut brain connection and how important that is.
Yeah, and before we briefly do that, I'm remiss and I apologize to our audience. I forgot to mention this. Um, why you're here and what you want to learn is really, really important to us. We started this off with a survey. I really encourage you to fill that out because after Dr. Varden's done educating us on why we care about the gut, why it's really important, how it influences health, we will kind of take a moment to read that survey, figure out why you're here. So fill out those questions. And if you're like, hey, I want to learn something that you didn't include there, please do jump into the chat and let us know. We love hearing feedback, just like Yvonne. I value so much. I got my green going on. I'm traveling, so I'm using a green screen, and that's great. But please do let us know what you want to learn. Dr. Varden and I were very passionate about serving people, so we want to make sure we're serving whatever brought you here this evening, serving all that is within the gut. So Dr. Varden, why don't you jump in? Because I think I have as someone that bugs are kind of like, I'm not sure if I'm happy about bugs living there. Someone once told me you're more like microbiome and virome than you are actual human. And that's always lived with me and creeps me out a tooch. So talk to us. What that which is more the biome, which is more us than we are, why is it important? What does it curate? What does it speak to in our health?
Well, when we're talking about our gut biome, I mean, when you go back and think when we were just these individual cells and, amoeba-like, species, and then, evolving over time,
Mhm.
we had to learn and grow and evolve with others.
Mm.
And, that includes bacteria and viruses and fungi, as we started becoming these multicellular beings and then multi organs and tissues and everything else. And when you really look at it, what are our mitochondria?
Mhm. I'm glad you brought this up.
Are the genesis of that symbiotic relationship. They are a bacterium. They actually have their own unique DNA. And actually, it's mitochondria DNA. It is passed down through the maternal line. So, you know, this is part of who we are. We are not just us. We are part of our environment, and we have grown to our environment. And that's not just terrestrial. It's not just the earth. It's also stardust. We are a part of stardust. We are a part of the universe in which we exist. So,
Yeah.
but bringing it back down more to earth, okay? The fact is, in order for us to live symbiotically with our environment, it has to be a part of us. And, there are several things that we are unable to break down by ourselves. Like I had said, we are not what we eat. We are what our gut biome breaks down and lets us absorb.
Yeah.
So
I find it so fascinating that our evolution has really acknowledged about and incorporated the fact that bugs are always going to be a part of us. And so instead of to an extent fighting them off, they'd said, cool, let's figure out how we can work together. Right. So mitochondria came in and it really educates the energy of the cell. Our biome, at least what most people think through, and I think we'll talk through this other value add, but one of the biggest things is the immune system. So we know that if your biome is poor, it does a poor job of supporting and educating an immune system. So can you talk to that connection, the one connection I think most people nowadays get, that between the biome and your immune system?
absolutely. And I will say that just to give you all an idea, because I didn't quite fully answer what you had asked about when we talked about microbiome cells
Mhm.
versus human cells. So the human body harbors about 39 trillion microbiome cells. And that includes the bacteria, fungi, viruses, archaea, this beautiful population, diverse population. And, they do primarily reside in the gut, very, very important, but they also reside on the skin, the mouth, other body parts. Um, when we talk about human cells, now we have and roughly 30 trillion human cells as compared to 39. So yeah, let's be friends with them. Let's play nice. Let's love them. Let's, make sure that that we are doing things to keep them happy, to keep us happy, but also keeping the troublemakers, to a minimum. So
So, so how does keeping them happy influence our health? Let's start with immune.
okay. So when we're talking about the immune system, um, the microbiome really helps with how our blood cells, how the other cells of our body. Remember, I said that food is information. Okay. So what the microbiome does is it produces postbiotics. So we know what uh, probiotics are. That's the actual, the bugs themselves. Okay. And then we take, probiotic supplements. We have yogurt and fermented foods that help, to get a lot of them. And we prebiotics, the food to feed them. But then there's postbiotics. Um, and here is where it's that those postbiotics that give packets of information to the
Mhm.
cells. It helps to feed other, microbes, but also the cells that we have. There's also things called LPSs, lipopolysaccharides. These can actually cause inflammatory effects because they are foreign to our body. This incites our immune system and goes, oh, wait a minute, let's take care of this. There is this constant balance. The gut and this, the reactions that it has, it's dynamic. It is not static. It is
Yeah.
constantly checking each other,
Yeah.
and that affects our immune system in the way of balancing that, especially when it comes to pathogenic species as compared to beneficial species.
So if I'm hearing you, or perhaps maybe I'm paraphrasing because I think you stated it so well, when we consume food, right? Sometimes that food is going to be probiotic. It's going to be little creatures that are helping feed. And sometimes it's food for actual probiotics. So what happens is, along with our digestive enzymes that our body produces, the bacteria effectively munches up. And it does for two different ends, right? It does to the end of fueling the body. We want to absorb that nutrition. But separate and apart from that, to your point of information, it's kind of like saying, cool, this is what is currently around me. So right now I have access to fresh food, or maybe right now I have access to more problematic food. And all of that is going to inform the gut, especially through what you're calling postbiotics. So the little things that it's spitting out after the fact, because, we eat, we poop. Bacteria is kind of doing the same thing. The postbiotics are effectively poop from the bacteria, if I'm hearing you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have to realize that the poop is just a matter of, excreting the wastes, getting rid of, what no longer serves us, to just kind of get it out, having that transit time. And obviously, some of that bacteria, actually, a certain amount of that bacteria is going to go with it. But there is quite a bit of it that still retains and resides in the gut.
Mhm.
Now, kind of going back, when we're talking about the immune system, development of immune cells, this, during infancy, this is really important because the microbiome actually helps train the immune system by introducing the body to these microbial antigens like LPSs and these different postbiotics. So,
Yeah.
that's why, when we talk about, healthy poop, a baby's poop is very healthy. It really is. I mean, not, within itself, but, it is through that it becomes trained by the mother, through a passive immune system regulation in the breast milk and these antibodies that are passed along. And, as the baby is growing, it coming in contact with others and getting colds and doing this, it's their immune system is being trained, and their microbiome is recognizing this. It is taking this in. It is being challenged because they're building their immune system.
I
And
think
go ahead.
one of the really neat ways that this can best be captured. So we look at a gene, we have a gene, it's called FUT2, and this will from one perspective, it kind of says, are you someone that naturally feeds your microbiome and gives it places not only to grab onto, but quite literally gives it food, right? Your body's saying, like, you biome are so important to me, I'm going to feed you. Or the other presentation of the gene is saying, I'm not going to offer that place to grab onto, and I'm not going to offer that food. And so when you compare babies, so the one group that says, cool, I have a gene that's going to feed the biome, and then separately, I have a gene that is not going to feed the biome. Babies with that gene that feed the biome, they by and large have not only more diverse and happy biomes. When we talk about immune education and that process that the biome does to inform the immune system, this is good, this is bad, react to that, don't react to that. They by and large have a better immune system profile, at least within infancy, and it trails off into toddler years too. So I think what Dr. Varden, you're saying, and is such an important point, is the biome is the space that teaches a child from the moment it comes into this world what is good, what is bad. Here's how we're going to react to the world. Correct?
And yes, oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you, it really makes a huge difference uh, for the microbial diversity of
Yeah.
that child, even the way that they are born, whether it be naturally vaginally as compared to through C-section. That, there are studies that have actually found that children through C-section do not have as diverse a microbiome, and that from some of the studies that they looked at, that they tend to have more infections. The robustness of their immune system is not as much as for those who were born naturally, because not only for those that are born naturally do they get the internal transfer with the mother, but they get microbiome from the vaginal canal, even
Yes.
from around the anus area as they are being born.
Yeah. Vaginal birth versus C-section is a big distinction. And let's not dive too deep down this rabbit hole, but I think
Right.
what's really interesting and really emphasizes the importance is, so for example, if a female has needed a C-section for whatever reason, any subsequent birth usually go through C-section. It's safest that way. And so if you're aware you will be getting a C-section for whatever reason, they will actually cultivate the mother's vaginal microbiome so that they can effectively paint the child with it when the child is pulled via that C-section. That is how important it is to kind of seeding that. So I wonder, now that we know it's really important for kind of from an immune perspective, a digestion perspective, a nutrition perspective, our biome quite literally munches up some of our food and gives us B vitamins. Um, why don't we talk a little bit about what can dysregulate it? What can kind of, so we've talked about the birth side of it, that can kind of disrupt things. We've talked about one gene. What are other things that can dysregulate our biome?
Toxins.
Mm. Favorite topic here. Favorite topic.
Oh yes, toxins are very rough on the microbiome. And when you consider, and you could even think of antibiotics in a way being a toxin to the gut biome, because that's exactly what they do. They are antibiotics, the biome, the bacteria. They kill the bacteria in the gut. Now, granted, usually we are given antibiotics because we have some sort of overgrowth in some fashion or form of a particular pathogenic species.
Mhm.
And, obviously, meaning our audience, follow what your doctor, healthcare practitioner, or whatever, has you follow, with open communication and realizing the impacts, pros and cons, of it. Don't be just following and doing what we say. This is for educational purposes. This is just, speaking on the topic from research perspective, from clinical observations, etc. So I do want to put that out there. But antibiotics are specifically for the purpose of killing bacteria and eliminating, hopefully eliminating the bad guys. But you have collateral damage in which it will also kill beneficial species.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's straightforward. But when you're talking about toxins, you can pretty much name just about anything that would disrupt the gut biome, any of the viruses, fungi, bacteria that are living in the gut. When you start shifting the balance of a healthy gut, you are going to have some of the species that will start overtaking, that survived enough, or that have started to be fed more. Because when I talk about toxins, I'm also talking about food. We're talking about highly processed foods, sugars, things like this that feed certain populations of the gut biome. And who's going to grow and get strong? Whomever you feed.
Yeah.
So that can start throwing off the balance for sure.
Yeah. I think the more I sit within this space of research, I'm always amazed at how much food can influence it, right? So I'm sure many people have seen the study where a person who otherwise eats a really good diet had some McDonald's, and then they took a poop sample 24 hours later, and it had completely dysregulated their biome. It was a marked shift, right? So there's a very interesting quick response to if you put kind of this fake food in, and McDonald's, go ahead and sue me. If you put fake food into the body, your biome is aware of that, and there is a consequence of that, right? A quick one. It's not a permanent one. You can recover from it. That by itself is not going to shift your biome irreparably, but
Well,
your
if
body
you
can.
have it once, maybe twice, but if it is more a consistent thing, yes, it is. Not necessarily irreparably. I
Yeah,
mean, as long as you start changing your habits,
yeah,
then you
yeah.
can start changing your gut terrain.
Agreed. And I think before we kind of shift a little bit into that conversation of how do we shift habits, I wonder if the powers that be can toss up onto the screen our survey. I'd love to know why people were here. I did invite you, if one of the survey questions didn't quite capture why you're here and what you want to learn, please do put it into the chat so that Dr. Varden and I can speak to it. As well as I'm seeing happily some questions fall into our Q&A that we'll address at the end. So we asked first, what is your primary gut health concern? And I'm seeing an equal schmattering, if you will, technical term. 26% is saying I have some digestive issues. I'm struggling with bloating or gas or constipation. The follow-up to that, oh, excusez-moi, the one that surpasses that, 32%, chronic inflammation or immunity concerns. So I think, Dr. Varden, your beautiful description at the beginning of why the immune system is so tightly bound up to the gut was on point there. Next is just from a general wellness and prevention perspective, which I love. I want to speak a little bit to that because really the population of our biome, how our biome is made up, we quite literally can correlate that patterning, that population to different conditions. So knowing what is in your biome can be, to a degree, predictive of what is coming down the pipeline for you health-wise, which is fascinating. The next question that we asked was, are you familiar with the roles of genes in gut health? And 20% of our audience, I love y'all, you're eager beavers. Yes, you are. But a majority of our audience, 63%, is saying kind of, not really, but I'm here for a reason and I love it. And then a very honest 9% is not at all. So welcome. Welcome. Let us know if you have any specific questions as we pull through. The last question that we have here is, what best describes your current approach to gut health? And this was you could pick all. So 40% of our audience is following a specific diet. 65% is taking probiotic or supplement, which it'll be interesting, Dr. Varden and I think you and I have competing opinions on this, not in a bad way, but I think we have different takes on this one. I think that's important to share those takes. Next, 40% stress management and sleep, just to focus on that and gut wellness. And then 20% are saying they haven't focused much, but they want to start. I like that. Thank you and welcome. I'm glad you guys are here this evening and can undertake that journey with us. 8% is saying other. I'm curious what the other is. What is your other approach to gut health? I think before the chat, we kind of tossed around jestfully, it could be a fecal transplant. If there's anyone in the audience that's done that, please let me know. But we want to know what the other is. What else are you doing to tend your gut health? Because there's so many different things. Yeah.
And if you do have questions, please put them in the question and answer, and we will make sure to address them, as we move along in this webinar. So, but yes, I would love to be able to see what other people, or what the other was about. Something I want to bring up as far as the importance of our gut biome to
Mhm.
gut, to the protection of our body. Because this really kind of, well, not kind of, it does work into the immune system, into our bodies, and how, I should say, in what ways that our gut biome helps us, protects us, and why we should love them and be friends with them is one of the things is they maintain our gut barrier. I
Mhm.
mean, they provide a physical protection. The gut microbiome actually supports the integrity of the intestinal barrier by stimulating mucus production and tight junction proteins. And you want a strong barrier to prevent harmful substances from entering the bloodstream. And this is, something that probably many of you have heard of, that when there is dysbiosis, when there is a disruption in the microbiome, that can lead to what we call leaky gut syndrome. This is where toxins and antigens can actually cross that gut barrier and trigger systemic inflammation, immune activation. It's, the tight junctions are no longer tight. Now they're loose and they're allowing these larger proteins and pathogenic species and all sorts of things to be crossing into our body that really shouldn't be crossing over. So,
Mhm.
this is where we really want to maintain our beneficial keystone species because they help to promote that gut barrier lining, especially like mucin, Akkermansia, mucinophilia. Um, those are a wonderful species that helps with that. So
Yes. For those in the audience in particular that were really concerned with inflammation and kind of the chronicity there, um, compromised gut barrier or leaky gut can be one of the root causes of this. And so I'd really encourage, if especially if you're thinking, how do I support my biome? How do I support this gut lining? Look within your DNA 360, look in the diet and nutrition section where it speaks to your gluten sensitivity. Okay. We evaluate a gene called HLA. HLA is most known for a lot of autoimmune conditions, right? Autoimmune kind of starts and lives within the gut. And for those that are not celiac, so we're taking celiac as a distinct diagnosis. We're going to pretend right now that's not part of this conversation. But if you're someone who is gluten sensitive, okay, as reported in your report, you are much more likely and susceptible to developing um, a compromised gut or leaky gut, if you will. So if you're kind of sitting with this chronic inflammation, I really encourage you jump into your report and look at that and then investigate with a practitioner. Would it be wise for you to abstain from gluten for a while to see if this is part of your root cause? Because what gluten will do, it's one of the more well-known offenders. It's a protein that the body struggles to digest. It's also a very contaminated protein insofar as it comes alongside a lot of other glycophosphates and other things that our gut bacteria don't like, separate from the protein. Okay. But in trying, the gut effectively identifies this protein as a noxious agent. It creates inflammation, which then can wear away at the barrier, which then can lend to a lot of that chronic inflammation. I'm not saying categorically give up your croissant. It is my diety. That said, if you register on your test as gluten sensitive, it should be a conversation you have with a trusted healthcare provider to evaluate, how do we figure out if this is part of my cause? And if so, what do we do about it? And I apologize to those that croissants are taken away from. It's cruel and unusual punishment.
that is kind of like if anyone couldn't eat chocolate.
Chocolate is a health goal. This is what we established.
Chocolate over croissants. Oh, okay.
Mumsia. D'accord. All right, Dr. Varden, help me get focused because all I can think of is chocolate croissant now.
Okay. Well, actually, something that's very important. I want to circle back a little bit to some of the postbiotics that I was talking about and dive into that a little bit more because this is very important and very useful. And that is the short chain fatty acids that are byproducts, metabolites from beneficial bacteria. So this would be from your Bacteroidetes phylum, the family, the larger family. Okay. And this particular family is actually more, what their function is more for digesting complex carbohydrates, breaking down those polysaccharides, the starches, cellulose, plant fiber things into more simple sugars, which can then either be absorbed, used by other bacteria. But that process helps extract additional energy from food and produces these short chain fatty acids. And these are things like butyrate, acetate, propionate. Okay. So they are carbon chains, but they're like 2 carbons, 3, 4 carbons, the short chain fatty acids, as compared to medium chain fatty acids, which is more of like your caprylic, caprylic acid. This is like your C6, 8, 10, 12 chains. Okay. And then you have your long chain. So when you see MCT oil, medium chain triglycerides, that's the medium chain. We're talking about the short chain, but yes, they are all in the same family of those fatty acids.
Yeah.
So, these are really important because they help to reduce inflammation by inhibiting the pro-inflammatory cytokines like TNF alpha, interleukin 6, IL-6. They also help to strengthen the gut barrier. So, I'm really speaking to those people, to the majority of the people who had said, hey, I'm dealing with inflammation. I'm dealing, with these issues. This is what's going on. And we want to make sure to do things that will help um, increase the Bacteroidetes phylum. Now, granted, not all of them, because there are some pathogenic, just like in the Firmicutes phylum, which also create short chain fatty acids, where they include the keystone species like Akkermansia muciniphila, etc. But they also have other ones like Clostridium. There are Streptococcus are also part of that major family. So we need to be mindful about which ones. And this is where getting the tests and knowing, okay, what do I have to work with, what are our balances, and then where do I need to support? Because the good beneficial bacteria like your Bifidobacterium, Lactobacillus, these are the ones that we really want to support.
Dr. Varden, your PhD is showing, and I love it so much. I'm
Getting
gonna
into my microbiology, just diving right in.
I know. I'm going to offer a quick translation because I think this is a really powerful and I would even offer to an extent an accessible translation. So what Dr. Varden in particular is saying words like Firmicutes and bacteriodites. So what she said is she's effectively called out different families, phyla, of bacteria that live within the gut. And again, remember how I kind of said gut patterning is really, really important. And so she's referenced a lot of these because they are the major families, the ones that occupy a healthy gut the most. Okay. And so if you were to be taking a gut 360 sample, which is glory be a little sample of poop, it's gross, and then goes off to a lab, it's screened for all of the bacteria that are there. You will then get a report that articulates kind of here's the breakdown of the Firmicutes, the bacteriodites, and then something kind of the guy that you ideally don't want, the proteobacteria. Okay, so knowing these different populations, you can actually gain a lot of insight into what is going on in the body. So for example, if your proteobacteria is high, we know you are either experiencing some form of chronic inflammation, or your diet's not so great, and that's a wake-up call to change your diet, right? So it's kind of one of those categories. But then the really cool thing is we can also tell you how much vegetable you're eating. Are you eating too much fat based on what your body prefers? All of these families will quite literally shift and mold and bend a little bit based on what you're consuming. It's really Dr. Varden, I know you use it a bit in your clinical practice. Like to me, it's very interesting what we can learn simply by knowing the population makeup within the gut, within that poop sample.
Yes, very much so. And when we're looking at that, I mean, first and foremost, we are looking at microbial diversity. You want a very diverse population. And I like to tell my clients, it's like the difference, well, consider it like a city, okay? So it's the difference between like New York City, very large, very diverse population, okay, as compared to a small town in Iowa. Not very diverse, okay, not, and I'm not putting any judgments on the actual cities. I'm strictly using them as a metaphor for the population and diversity. You want something more like New York City, and you want a beautiful arrangement where everything has their checks and balances. Because
Mhm.
like I said, when you are looking at these larger families, like in our Gut 360, one of the things that we look at for that overall score, because we actually start at that 30,000-foot view for your gut diversity score. And then we start zooming in and get to the phyla, that family, those larger families. And we look at, 4 major families, the Bacteroidetes that I mentioned, for more carbohydrate breakdown, the Firmicutes, which is more of the fat digestion breakdown. Then we have your proteobacteria. Now, oftentimes when you see higher levels of this, that is an indicator of higher inflammation. So this also gets back to what the majority of the people here have issues with, is that inflammation. Well, this is something that is reflective of that, and where those species, that family, that larger family, will be higher when there's more inflammation. And then finally, the fourth major family is actually a fungi family called Ascomycota. And these are these
I've
are
never even tried that word. Good job.
these are actually a group that Dr. Ganoum, who has done the research on fungi in the gut biome, has found they are very important and work synergistically with the gut bacteria, and they are very necessary. So they, for Ascomycota, you're thinking, okay, well, kind of what did they do? Well, they help to break down organic substances. Okay. They are there to help and work with the good bacteria. Now,
Mhm.
yes, we're always going to have our ruffians, um, our rowdy crowd. We just don't want them overtaking our city. Okay, so we've got to have our police. We've got to have, the rest of our communities that keep more of that balanced homeostasis, which again is not static. It is dynamic, and it will change with even just one meal, just like you were saying, Dr. Kosterman. One meal can actually start shifting it, but it's the recovery of which, how is that going to be? Are you going to continue doing things that will disrupt your biome, or are you going to get back on, a healthier path, lessening your toxic load that can affect the gut biome? Having and giving the good healthy foods to feed the good guys, the beneficial species, because that will actually help to shift the proteobacteria lower and lower that inflammation, which, is what I had mentioned about earlier.
Now, I'm seeing within the questions, we have a beautiful slew of them, and I'm excited to get into them because I think that will happily transition us more into the what do you do about it and being very specific as to the measures. That said, I did promise people something before we transition, namely announcing a wait list of a new gut test that we're introducing. So Dr. Varden, Lara's really beautifully articulated kind of the power of the current testing. It's really strong in grasping what are the families that you have and what does this tell you about your health? How many plants are you eating? Are you someone whose biome favors you towards weight gain? Are you someone who has a lot of inflammation? Really, really strong in that end. What we are introducing though is going to be the Gut 360 Premium. And this is a test that, again, takes some of your poop. I'm so happy to be talking about this. If my sister's watching, you're welcome. But takes a little sample, analyzes it for its constituents, and the really powerful thing that it does is it leverages AI to do a deeper pattern analysis. So what I've alluded to and is that different conditions, different mood conditions, different gut health conditions for those out there with bloating or constipation, right? For different gut health conditions, for different mood conditions, for certain inflammatory conditions, right? Those all tend to have, to an extent, signature patterns within the gut, certain populations that would, um, that will flourish. And so there's an added layer of AI on there because AI does patterns best. It does this large information analysis best. And it does this by keeping speed with research that no human has capacity. So for those out there who know that one day I aspire to be a cyborg, this is kind of where my happiness sits. It's where medicine can kind of meet with technology insofar as technology appreciates the research, appreciates the pattern, and then is able to say this pattern is healthy, or maybe this pattern is associated with depression. And here, based on the populations that predispose towards that risk of depression, here's what you can do to address that, be it a probiotic, be it a lifestyle measure, or in certain cases, even here's a medication you might want to consider. So that's what we're cooking up for the future. The powers that be in the chat are going to toss in a link. And if you want to click on that link, you'll be led to a landing page of sorts where you can put in information. You can be put in waitlist for all the information, especially information where I get to be extra nerdy and kind of dive into exactly how the AI works and what exactly the benefits of it all can be. We don't want to focus on that too much tonight, but if you're interested, please do jump into the chat. You'll see a link there. And now, Dr. Varden, excuse me, I've been talking a lot today, which is why the water is plentiful. Dr. Varden and I are going to start jumping into the questions because we want to make sure that we're serving the people here who have questions for us. So, Dr. Varden, I'm going to ask you the first question here. Um, mm, the question is from Norma, and she's asking, have you found that a majority of your clients struggle with parasites in the gut? If so, do you have any recommendations as to how to get rid of them?
Actually, as far as the majority, I can't say the majority, but I do have several that do, yes. And I do want to say that okay, prepare yourselves that a lot of us do have parasites in our guts. Okay. I mean, it is what it is. And just because you may live in the US or Canada and think, oh, but how in the world could I get parasites in my gut? Guess what? You're eating vegetables, you are eating food, you are, in contact with animals in the outdoors and everything else. If you have dogs, which are fantastic, love them, they actually enrich. I have two of them. They actually help to enrich your gut biome diversity. Okay. So they do wonderful things. But if they're licking your face or, anything like that, that is a way for parasites to enter your system. Not the only way. Don't be getting rid of your dog. Don't, start treating them differently like that. But I'm just telling you, these are the way that it happens, or eating, different vegetables or foods that might have it on there. So yes, I even had parasites. I usually do a cleanse, periodically, at least I do a general detox, once a year, once every other year, but I even do like full moon parasite cleanses. So, there are different protocols that can be used. And I'll tell you, it's amazing, to be able to release them. Yeah, it can seem really gross, but hey, all the more, don't you want them out of you? So, you know, sometimes it doesn't bother when I did my detox, and yes, I did release some. Did I have problems before? Did I know that I had them? No. So it doesn't always necessarily cause such issues that, oh my gosh, I'm really having some serious problems. But some people are more sensitive, and cleansing the body, getting rid of the parasites can actually relieve a lot of those issues. And don't forget, parasites, they eat first. So foods that you are taking in, and I've had this where clients like, I am eating so healthy. All I eat is organic. I am, it's just like I'm the healthiest eater of anyone I know. Why am I not absorbing my nutrients? Why are my levels, the way that they are? Why am I feeling this way? And, after assessing everything, realizing, oh, good chance you've got parasites, do a parasite cleanse, all of a sudden things are changing.
And I would really encourage you, Norma, if you're concerned about this, working with a practitioner. There's some more
Yeah,
diagnostic stool testing I would recommend, namely, and again, it needs to be a larger sample so that a further workup can be done. And then in particular, if it's something more pathogenic, something concerning, something that truly threatens health, there's different protocols that can be done both from an herbal perspective or, if needed, a pharmaceutical perspective. So I think there's different points with which you can land on that spectrum. But if it's to the point where you're concerned about, I would sincerely encourage a diagnostic stool sample that can drill into what parasite is there, and working with your healthcare provider to address that. Yeah. All right. I think, Dr. Varden, we've gotten really good into a groove of every other. So I'll take this next one then if you want to ready for the next question.
sure.
Um, yeah, so Anne is saying her DNA report says that she has a suboptimal biome. Can you recommend a good prebiotic and a probiotic supplement? So, yeah, so Anne, and I guess for everyone's awareness, when we say it's a suboptimal microbiome in the DNA Gut 360, or sorry, the DNA 360. So this is the genetic test, not the poop test. We're really evaluating, really, does your body have capacity to establish a good one? So for example, at the top of this webinar, we talked about FUT2 and how that can influence, are you someone that feeds your bacteria in good ways and helps them along? Or are you someone that doesn't? And therefore they're not setting up camp in the same way that they should be. So people with suboptimal microbiome, party hosting, plainly is what I call it, will be along a few different spectrums. We think of, are you feeding your guests with FUT2? We think of, do you have a good guest list, and are you enforcing that if you're a bad actor, you're kicked out of the party? That's kind of our detox profile. And lastly, vitamin D, right? Dr. Varden's talks so intimately about how important the immune system is to the biome and vice versa. And without vitamin D, neither are going to come about. Right? So when we think about pre and probiotic supplementation, I'll be plain. I'm not someone that by and large recommends those agents unless there's something wrong. I think when we talk about a daily maintenance plan, i.e., you're not sick, you're just looking to improve, research really says the best way you can do this is through food-based changes. So by and large, my advice, unless there's something wrong, is going to be focusing on prebiotic foods. Okay, so that's a lot of our insoluble fibers. Think about like Jerusalem artichokes, think about cold potatoes. Yes, someone's encouraging you to eat potatoes cold. Um, think about nuts and seeds and a lot of the things that have kind of like those fibers. That's what our bacteria love and eat. That's why they get so excited about these things. And then from a probiotic perspective, right, I think more to the end of, the kimchis and the kefirs and the kombuchas and the things, the nattos of the world, the things that will naturally have that seeding within them, the sauerkrauts of the world, right? For some of the more Machiavellian out there, you can take like a shot of sauerkraut juice, good for you. That would be where I'd start. And then if you're looking to go beyond that, I'd really encourage you to connect with a clinician. And the reason I say this, different strains are studied for different things. So a strain that might be recommended for more bloating and gas sort of things is different than that would be recommended for mood and behavior. We need to understand what you're trying to address, and that will guide the strain. So really, really encourage you. This is kind of why the quality of testing and the quality of clinician care is so important. Okay, because We know so much now. It's so much more in an individualized, exacting level that me saying, "Here's a general probiotic," is doing you a disservice. There's an element of, let's dig into the why so we can assign a proper strain. Yeah. So I hope that was helpful to you, Anne. Dr. Varden, do you want to jump into the next question?
Absolutely. And hi, Dirk. So good and glad that you are with us. I love having him in our audience. He always has such great questions. Love to see you here. So, anyway, Dirk is asking, is there any accurate way to determine if one has leaky gut? I've heard it said that the presence of zonulin in a fecal test is indicative since it's a compound in the tight junction protein that regulates the permeability of the gut wall. But others say that zonulin is not a good indicator. And I will say that at least from my research and understanding, determining if someone has leaky gut can be challenging. There isn't a universally accepted diagnostic test. Yes, you're right about zonulin, that it is a protein that regulates the permeability of the gut wall. And obviously is often mentioned in the context. Elevated levels of zonulin in stool, blood can definitely indicate increased intestinal permeability, but its reliability as a sole marker for leaky gut, that's debatable. Again, that it really is under the auspices of the knowledge, experience of the doctor that you are seeing, the tests that they're looking at. Is this the only test? And I wouldn't suspect it's the only one. But there are definitely symptoms and other aspects that can be assessed. So yeah, zonulin testing is a test that can be looked at. There's also what they call the lactulose mannitol test. This involves drinking a solution that has like sugars and then measuring the levels in urine. And higher levels can suggest increased permeability. There's other tests like a PEG 400 test that's similar to the lactose mannitol test, but uses polyethylene glycol molecules. Not something that I necessarily prefer personally. And there's about 10% of the population who actually has allergic reactions or sensitivities to the polyethylene glycol. Blood tests can look at markers for inflammation, immune response that might suggest increased gut permeability. Also, things like our Gut 360 test, or our other test we are coming out with, it can actually dive a little bit deeper into what's the current population. Are there species there that are known to give postbiotics or inflammatory markers, things that would cause the tight junctions to loosen up, to cause that permeability that I had mentioned earlier this evening. So really, this is something that, again, is up to the practitioner that you happen to be working with.
All right, and Dr. Varden, I'm actually going to take the next two because they kind of link well together. So just more as a help. So this is Nina asked the first question just in regards to during childbirth. If a mother has a lot of fungi in the vaginal canal, does the child develop autism due to swallowing it during birth? So I'd kind of say most prenatal care, from a mother perspective, they will actually swab the mother to understand what is happening within the vaginal canal if they expect a vaginal birth to mitigate that. So for example, we know if there's the likelihood of a herpes outbreak, right? You want to mitigate that before the child goes through that canal. And so that is part of the workup. So autism, plainly, we don't know the exact why, but most people agree it's a multifactorial thing, meaning there's not one thing that is going to be causing it. It's probably a concert, a symphony of several different things. Can kind of a microbial disruption of the mother be part of that? The answer is maybe. There's a few suggestive studies, but nothing to the end that would say categorically this is definitely one of the causes. And part of that is because if the mother is in a state where there's a bit of a biome disruption within the vaginal canal, there's probably a larger poor health picture within her. And that might be more influential than the species itself, right? We want to be careful of not getting too reductionistic. If this, then that. We have to think about what would lend to that disruption of the vaginal biome. So something just to think about there. I appreciate that's a bit of a non-answer, Nina, but I think it's important that we're honest with what we currently know. The next question is coming from Dirk, and again, it's asking that question of, does the vagina, vaginal canal, words, we're getting close, have a distinct biome? And does this transfer to the child? So yes, it does. Period. Again, I kind of mentioned, like, before a woman goes in to give birth, part of the workup is, let's test that biome. Let's make sure it's, free from agents, pathogens we know will hurt the child. And it is quite literally through that physical transfer, right? Some of the swallowing, if you will, right? Like that, it goes in as well as not just populates the skin biome. All of this is really important when it comes to supporting the child. And it's also important to us. I think it's part of female health. The vaginal biome is distinct from gut biome, just like is distinct from skin biome. And so one of the things we're working on for next year is tests that are very specific to understanding the vaginal biome, because putting a vaginal sample through a gut test isn't going to be very helpful. We want different populations, we want different patterns, but that's something we're working towards the end of, and thankfully is part of pregnancy care in most established medical systems. I hope that was helpful, both Dirk and Nina. Yeah.
And I will take the next question from
Mhm.
Yvonne. And Yvonne is saying, if one has been taking probiotics for years, should you change up from time to time, and how to do that? And I'm going to take this in a couple different ways. And first of all, if you have been taking the same probiotics for years, yeah, honestly, it is generally a good idea to change it up, because I'll said it before, I'll say it again. We are not static creatures. We are dynamic. We are constantly growing, evolving, changing, our cells turning over, our environments changing, the weather changing. So if we are so dynamic, why should our supplements, our food, and everything else be so static? It shouldn't. So with probiotics, I love what Dr. Kostroman had said about leaning into food first. Feed the good guys. Okay. And that's actually a motto of mine. I always like to go to food first. So if you are relatively healthy, you have no major issues, say, you've done a gut biome test and everything seems to be all right. You might need a little, help here or there. Again, lean into the food first. But, say you do want, your probiotics, then rotate them. Yes, rotate them every few months. Consider, like 3 to 6 months, and introduce different strains that can benefit your gut. So focus on your keystone species. So we're talking about lactobacillus, bifidobacterium, Saccharomyces, Akkermansia, these bacterium that are very beneficial. So, and also look at some different kinds. Look at, I know that Justin and I have spoken several times on webinars about different probiotics that we like, that we use. Pendulum is a great company. Seed is a great company. Microbiome Labs, this is what their focus is on, and they have different groupings. So make sure that, of course, you are getting a company that is that has done the studies, third-party studies, has done this, not just any old probiotics, because you don't want to be throwing your money away either. But also consider fermented foods.
Mhm.
Remember, go back to your foods. Incorporate a variety of fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, sauerkrauts, kimchi, kombucha. And I know some of you can be like, oh, but there's a lot of sugar in kombucha. Well, not all of them. And the thing is yes, you do have to put, they do make it with sugar because that is what the bacteria eat, but then it's the postbiotics that they make and how they grow. So actually the initial sugar that they put in, the actual levels that when you are taking it in is actually lower, but you can actually look on the nutritional label, get ones that are lower in the sugar content. So you're not, overloading your body with, excess, extraneous sugars. So, because the natural foods contain many different probiotic strains. So, but I will tell you, test, don't guess. 60 test, take a look. What do you actually have to work with? What specifically might you need a little help with? Because if there are specific strains that you are low in, well, then you can rotate and do a probiotic that is more focused on those strains. In about 3-6 months, switch over to another one and do it that way. So there you go.
All right. So, Katie, I hope I'm saying that right. Katie, there wasn't really a question, but I imagine it was seed for kind of commentary. She said induced birth, not breastfed, allergy to formula. Um, Now 74 and having a lot of GI issues, including GERD and gas, on a gluten-free diet and avoids dairy. So Kathy, just simply based on the age, one of my first thoughts there is going to be considering and working with digestive enzymes. Okay, so as we get older, the output of our stomach and bile duct and all the things that kind of help with digestion, it's not as strong as when we were 20, even 30, right? And so we want to look at how do we support some of this digestion? Because if you're sitting with a lot of gas, and I'm going to imagine and assume that your diet is already controlled for, right? It could be an element of you're just struggling a little bit with digestion. Okay. I think if there's more gas, again, it can be very suggestive of a biome disruption. So possibly you want to look into a stool test to really figure out what are the different populations, and then work with a practitioner to take those results and then couple them with results that you have either lived and learned, as in when I eat this, my body doesn't like it, or separate to that, something like the gut, the DNA 360, where it says, you know what, based on your AMY1 gene, for example, you do not digest carbohydrates well, and so maybe we decrease that. Maybe we look at a diet that's lower in carbohydrates so that we can support better digestion. Okay. When it comes to the GERD, again, it's a curiosity of, are you digesting properly? So for people out there, GERD is a fancy way of saying heartburn. Okay. And so want to look at, how the digestive process is working. What are you eating? What you're eating often will lend to GERD. And then separate to that, like, do we actually need to do some some stomach repair, a few other things. I'd really encourage Katie working with a practitioner, right? Talking to someone saying this is exactly what's going on, because beautifully, a lot of the support that you can offer to heartburn or GERD is some of the same support that you would be offering for gut. And happily, they'll kind of both meet up there. It sounds like, at least from the beginning, like with many people, right? For a long time, women were encouraged, like, hey, don't breastfeed, use formula. There's a lot of people in your boat, and there's ways that we can support getting back to a good gut for you. But I think working with a practitioner would be really advised, so that you're kind of shortcutting and jumping to a solution as opposed to meandering for a little bit. I hope that was helpful, Katie. Dr. Varden, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. Okay, so we have Sylvia, and she's saying vegetarian. She's vegetarian with occasional bloating with very loose stool. What can be causing the loose stool and sometimes an urgency to go to the restroom? Well, this it could be several potential things, and honestly, without knowing more to really zone in on what the possible issue really could be, I'll take it as a general, assessment. But again, if you are having such loose stools, first of all, I want you to be careful of your hydration. I know I'm going to be jumping to, what can you do? But when it comes to diarrhea, dehydration is a serious issue. So make sure that you are staying hydrated, that you are getting your electrolytes, that you are getting your trace minerals, so that way your cells, tissues, and body are being hydrated. Okay, so getting back to possibilities of what's going on. Dietary choices. Any high intake of certain foods, fiber-rich vegetables, fruits, legumes, they can sometimes lead to loose stools. Sugar, foods high in sugar alcohols, or lactose, because as a vegetarian, you could be having dairy, you could, be consuming even gluten. Okay. Those items could actually cause those symptoms. Now, again, I don't know if you have a history or any issues of any, chronic conditions, or bowel disorders, or even food intolerances, because a lot of that, it does, for food sensitivities, eating those foods, even though they fit within the paradigm of your particular eating habits as a vegetarian, your body may be sensitive to them and therefore are reacting accordingly. Also, if there are any infections, any gastrointestinal infections from bacteria, viruses, parasites, these can cause loose stools. Your body is brilliant. It wants to get rid of very quickly anything that it finds offensive and, that could be detrimental to your system. So there's a lot of areas to look into and to question, that could be the culprit, but without more of a history and more details, it's really hard to start pinning down.
Yeah, Sylvia, I'd really, I think Dr. Varden gave a very good and comprehensive answer here, and I'd encourage you working with a practitioner who can offer you a third-party perspective. I was a veg head for 25 years, so I saw a lot of people in my practice that were either um, plant-based of some form or fashion or hoping to become so, and there's a lot of considerations, and I would even offer ancestry might be among them, right? Southeast Asian folk, so those born within India or surrounding countries tend to be much more um, physiologically open to that sort of diet based on genes compared to like someone of Mediterranean or Northern European descent. So I think it needs to be a really well-informed conversation, and one with someone who's compassionate, because when you're considering potentially a diet change because it's not working with your body, my heart feels for you, because that's a big thing to consider. It's a big thing to grapple with. Yeah. All right. Vicky, and sorry, just before I move on to that, Katie asked a question. She says, when I say practitioner, are we referring to DNA practitioner? Entirely up to you. We can refer out, but by and large, if you want DNA to be a consideration, I would encourage either within our clinic or someone who's trained on genes, because they may not be able to speak to at least the genetic side of it as well, as part of kind of what's going on, if you weren't working with someone who was well versed in genes and functional genes, the way we look at them. So Vicky is asking the question of an words, we're so close. I have an overactive immune system in my gut, according to my DNA. And there are so many good, healthy foods it is fighting against, causing leaky gut. She's eliminated gluten and all of the foods in my Zoomer food sensitivity test that my immune system is fighting. What else can I do so that I don't have leaky gut? Yeah. So what I would, Vicky, what I would offer, and again, I don't mean to make this my default answer, but when you say your immune system is overactive in the gut, I'd really be curious as to what exactly does that mean to you? How do you know that, right? And your answer as to how do you know that will really direct what else can be done, okay? So some people, It is, when we were speaking to Katie, it could be an issue of digestion. For other people, it can be a mood and behavior thing, right? There's a connection between mind and gut, and quite literally, when you're depressed, you digest differently, or when you're anxious, you digest differently. Your biome is supported differently. Um, for other people, it might be, we see in particular in the tests, one of the reasons your proteobacteria, that population we don't want around, sometimes people have a perfect diet and that's still high. And that's because there's actually an issue elsewhere in the body that is then aggravating that population and inspiring that population. So again, I'm very mindful never to dismiss people's questions, but I'd really encourage you to talk with a practitioner, because what does it mean to have an overactive immune system in your gut mean to you? How is that presenting? And then history can really speak to that. Is there a lot of antibiotics in the history? Is there a lot of travel in the history? Is there? All of that will influence this. So without dismissing, I hope that inspires you to work with a practitioner you trust to kind of get to the root cause of this. All right, Dr. Varden?
Yes. Actually, I love Mary's question because I have had several clients deal with this. And what she asks is, what supplements are best for Candida overgrowth?
Mm.
Um, because I do a lot with gut biome and with my clients, I have had several with Candida overgrowth. And the first thing I would say is not necessarily jumping to supplements, even though that is part of the overall protocol, but you really want to start looking at your food, the
Yes. Oh, you're preaching, girl.
eating, because first of all, Candida is a yeast. It is yeast overgrowth, and some things that often are connected with overgrowth of Candida in the gut is you will sometimes see it thrush on the tongue, the white on the tongue, UTIs. Okay, urinary tract infections also kind of go hand in hand, but it is really absolutely foundationally important to cut out the sugar. Candida love and thrive on sugar. And something that I tell my clients is that you need to be aware of the fact that dead Candida, once they start dying off, can cause massive sugar cravings. So it's like being aware that that is their food. They are going to push and go, feed me sugar. You've got to realize that that's what they're doing, and that you have to fight against that and do what you can to have the support to work through it. So
Just like we've evolved with bacteria, they've evolved with us and they know how to trick us. To Dr. Varden's point, they're quite literally sending out signals to be like, feed us. And your body interprets that as signals sent from itself to feed it. So it
Mhm.
feels very organic and innate to you, even though it's your creepy little critter saying that.
Precisely. That's why, when people say, oh, I eat an intuitive diet, what I'm craving or what I want. And it's just like, be careful of that. So, but really it's the food first, and doing a Candida diet. Now, granted, there is a bit of a spectrum on the Candida diet. I mean, there are some as strict as going no fruit at all, some saying, okay, low glycemic index fruit, but you have to find what works for you. Definitely and strongly encouraging under the guidance of a, practitioner. But kind of getting into the educational aspect, because you can actually, do searches and look this up. But typically, if you're working with, an MD or someone who prescribes medication, depending on the severity of the Candida issue, you would probably get a prescription for an antifungal like flucosanol or itraconazole or something like that. But again, that is by prescription, and that would have to be followed under that. Different kinds of supplements. TUDCA, is very good. You want to help to support the liver to help process, the toxins and everything else that come along with Candida as a pathogenic species. grapefruit seed extract, things like oregano oil, caprylic acid, something I had mentioned before. It is a medium chain triglyceride, a carbon 8 triglyceride. But again, really looking at, maybe a FODMAP, fermented foods, the diet thing is absolutely foundational. And I'll tell you, if you are suffering with this, because like I said, I've had many clients that have, get in a support group, get with others that are dealing with it day in, day out, because there's a lot of nuances, daily things, or maybe when you're going, but I'm craving the sugar, and going crazy and just not knowing how are you dealing with this? They can be a support system. So, that's it. It's more common than you think.
Yeah. All right. Mina has asked our next question. She's saying, what food is best for a high homocysteine? What food is best for high homocysteine in plasma? So what she's saying is she probably got some blood work, and in the blood work was saying the homocysteine was high. So homocysteine, traditionally it's observed for cardiovascular wellness. We've correlated that higher homocysteine has worse cardiovascular outcomes, so worse kind of heart and vasculature health. And part of the reason for that is, from a biochemistry perspective, homocysteine can really be reflective of how is your methylation coming along, and methylation being one of the most important processes in the body in regards to communication and kind of detox and all of the fun things. We've done so many webinars on this, and maybe the powers that be can toss one in. So I would offer that there's not necessarily one food. I'd say, you need to understand this in context to your whole health. So if the doctor ordered this because they're concerned about your heart, or they're checking up on your heart, you might want to start focusing not necessarily on a singular food, but instead a diet that really supports heart health. Right? I know DASH diet's pretty popular. I tend to sit, unless there's another reason, more towards a Mediterranean diet. Okay. Sometimes it might need to be a paleo. Your DNA 360, kind of the genes that carry it, what foods are best for you, might be helpful in this instance of figuring that diet out. If the doctor didn't run it to that, it was more to check up on your methylation, B vitamins, and things like that, you might want to be more specific with how you're supplementing some B vitamins and support to that end. So that might require further blood work or adjustment of your supplements, leveraging DNA 360 again, because we have a beautiful panel that speaks to methylation and what supplements can be supportive there. So I wouldn't say there's one singular food. If it's a B vitamin issue, maybe foods that are higher in B vitamins, that can be dark leafy greens, that can be animal products, so animal foods. Or if it's a cardiovascular thing, that might need to be a much larger conversation with your doctor and include potentially more a diet shift, a lifestyle shift, as opposed to how do I chase this one value. So I'd encourage you connecting with the provider to understand why they took that and what does it mean in the picture of your larger health. Yeah.
So, excuse me, our next question is by Deborah, and she says, can the microbiome test results of one member of a family household with children or parents inform ideal eating patterns for the rest of the family, since most households use meals shared in common across family members? Short answer, yes. There is a lot, research has shown that there's a lot of the microbiome diversity, they mirror each other in families. They're very, very similar because you are sharing the environment, you are sharing the food. Obviously, there might be some little differences based on the genetics, okay? And we are talking like DNA 360 aspects where there can be fine-tunement, but overall, yes, that it would be a good foundational place to start. So did you have any other comments on that?
So here's the tricky of it, right? Genes and food and other sorts of things, including history of birth and history of whatever else, do influence how things are seeded. And so by and large, while I think trends within families can be similar, in particular if they're, more of a we do everything together family, but if you think about everyone typically leaves the house, does things, and then comes back at the end of the day, there's a lot of other opportunity either for different food, separate to that, different health histories will help seed things. So I would say if, the family is by and large well, sure, maybe one test of one of family member might be helpful. I would never base an entire plan off of that though for a different individual. And if you know that you all live markedly different lifestyles, or one person truly isn't well, you might want to consider a separate test for them because the biome is plainly the biome's like your DNA. Every person will have a different imprint, even if you're kind of always feeding them the same food, because your brain feeds the biome, your body does, your immune system. There's so many different variables that are beyond just the control of we live in one space and we eat the same food. So just something to consider, but I appreciate money's tough. And so sometimes if you're all well enough, right, one person might be helpful there. Yeah.
Yeah, and it can also work into a particular person's sensitivity in their detox pathways, where they have more sensitivities, which again, that is one piece of the puzzle. Microbiome is another piece of the puzzle. It is not the entire piece. Just like DNA, it is not the entire piece. We are very complex. There are many different factors. So therefore, different modalities and different aspects should be addressed. But foundationally, I mean, obviously, you're not going to be, eating organic, healthy food for, half the family and McDonald's.
Yeah.
There are certain foundational aspects that you want to keep more consistent, obviously. So,
Yeah. All right. The next
next.
question we have from Elizabeth. She's asking, what is the role for L-glutamine powder to support the gut? So L-glutamine is it's a supplement you can take, an amino acid, I believe, and it 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 is considered a primary fuel source for the gut lining. So think about it as kind of like gasoline to a car. It is the gas that you can put into the intestinal lining. So it supports not only motility and kind of all the function that your gut does in the sense of moving food around and absorbing, it also helps with that gut integrity. So, Dr. Varden talked a little bit about leaky gut, right? It helps kind of with some of that structural and support there. A lot of people will take it in response to IBS and other conditions where the gut is going to be fatigued because it's being beaten up by whatever condition it might be. Be careful. A few things, dosing usually isn't within the gram space. So it's something people tend to take as a powder, not necessarily within capsules. Otherwise, you're taking a whole handful of capsules. So something to be very mindful of, though, doing too much, you might get some diarrhea because it's going to excite that gut, feed that gut a little bit too much. You put too much gas in the tank, it's going to overflow. But the other thing is just be very mindful of any history of colorectal cancer within the family or within yourself. Ideally, while it can be part of a cancer care plan under proper supervision, it's not something you want to be doing if you have cancer within your body, or sorry, within your gut without proper supervision. So something just to be mindful of there. Again, supplements are like medications. Appropriate situation and with supervision is really important. Dr. Varden?
So our next question is Dr. David. Hello and welcome, and thank you for being here. His question is high quality sushi something to be concerned about? First of all, I am a lover of high quality sushi. So, okay, so concerns, that's, in a very general sense, there are things like mercury levels. I mean, even in high quality sushi, that is always a concern because, tuna, salmon, they are larger fish, higher on that, food scale. So therefore their accumulations can be higher. You know, that can actually affect gut biome, affect many different systems in the body when you're talking about heavy metal toxicity. It also depends on how often do you eat it. I mean, I have friends who eat it quite a bit and have some issues and need to, do some cleanses, because they still choose to do that, which is fine. I eat it periodically. And again, high quality, and I'm glad you qualified that, because that certainly makes a difference. Don't be getting sushi at, the local, gas station or anything.
Yeah, I think the high quality really speaks to a handling process and the belief that based on this handling process, we're minimizing as much as possible the risk of parasite or other bacteria. But be mindful, A, any process is flawed, and B, you can't control for absolutely everything. So there's always a small risk, which is by and large why women or people who are carrying children aren't advised to eat sushi. Those that are immune compromised are not, because you can't guarantee through the high quality. But it's been a practice for a long time, so if you're okay with that kind of trace risk, yeah, like
Right.
Dr.
And the nice thing is that some sushi varieties actually include fermented ingredients like miso or pickled vegetables, and those can actually contain beneficial probiotics. So, I mean, that right there, hey, there's a benefit. Also, the fact like salmon, the tuna, okay, which very commonly used in sushi, high omega-3 fatty acids. And actually, there has been research that has shown that any or any mercury levels lower, I mean, obviously not, massive mercury levels, but lower mercury levels that are found in the fish, that the omega-3s actually offset uh, the detriment of that, because they help to protect the body, the cells, and being able to process out, these toxins. So, I mean, not to mention, look at the nutrient richness. Sushi is such a great source of essential nutrients, vitamins, minerals like B12, vitamin D, iron, selenium, so many things that are important to bodily functions. And as long as the high quality, the handling, lowering the possibility of bringing in pathogens is low, yeah, I'd say enjoy the heck out. No, I do when I get the chance.
I was gonna say, we just found your croissant. We just found your food deity. All right. Janice has Janice, I apologize. I hope I'm saying that correctly. There's a question in the chat. She's like, what is the difference in um uh, effectively, she's saying, some stool tests say, hey, just send in a little cotton swab that's covered. Other tests say, hey, send us in a piece. Um, there's many different reasons to test stools. Sometimes it includes, blood. Sometimes it includes parasites. Sometimes it includes just the bacteria. By and large, from a bacteria kind of virus perspective, a small sample, a computer can get all the information it needs. Oftentimes larger samples might be more specific to certain parasites, or might be specific to blood. So it's really a matter of what exactly are you looking for, and that's why different tests might be recommended for different reasons, because the end product of what you're looking for is going to be different. So I hope that's helpful. It's a little bit of depends on the test, depends on why you're taking the test, that will influence the sample size. Some tests we're getting a bit better at, looking at parasites will shed cells and picking up those cells. So not necessarily parasite tests need to be larger, but often I find they still are. Yeah, Dr. Varden, I think you're going to close us out with the last question of the evening.
Yes. And this question is from Thomas, and he says, I eat healthy, avoid gluten, commercial dairy, and processed foods. I also take digestive enzymes with nearly every meal. Are there any issues with always taking digestive enzymes? I don't
Mm.
hear many talking about that. Also, does the DNA company test for parasites and toxins as well? Well, first of all, digestive enzymes, it's not like there's anything wrong with them. But it also depends on, do you need them? One of the things, do you have your gallbladder? Okay, that's a big thing. I know my mother dealt with it when she had her gallbladder out last year. The doctor never told her anything about digestive enzymes and, the benefits of that. I'm the one who told her and had her get on them. But I mean, I still have all my parts and pieces and organs and everything else. And I take digestive enzymes, especially on heavier meals, or, do I always take them? No. Are they beneficial? Yes. But you also want to make sure that you don't get dependency on them. The regular use might lead your body to becoming more reliant on them. And we want to make sure that your natural enzymatic production stays, active, which, pulsing on, or again, having foods that you may not eat regularly. That's your body's like, oh, wait a minute, what's this? Or, say that there was something that you may have had a situation where you're a little compromised and needing a little extra help for the digestion, or you have symptoms, or your practitioner you know has deemed them more necessary. Are they necessary all the time in a generally healthy person? No. um, there's also something that people could have or experience side effects: nausea, diarrhea, abdominal cramps, if they are taking too much. uh, there could possibly be some allergies. I mean, we have to realize that digestive enzymes, these supplements, can sometimes contain ingredients that can cause allergic reactions, sensitivities. Many of them are based, and extracted from bacterium, which again, it can be fine. But if you have some issues, or if you're having sensitivities, this could be a problem. Also, any interactions with medications. So again, this really needs to be taken a look at from healthcare practitioner, and looking. And I can see that you have a comment as well. So please.
Yeah, so
Share
I
with
think the research-informed answer doesn't exist when it comes to supplements, and the reason being we don't have that longitudinal study. We don't have that person who has been on it for so many years to say yay or nay. What we do have some study on, though, there's a medication called Creon, which is effectively a high-powered prescription grade digestive enzyme. It's slightly different, not one for one, but it's the closest analogy we have, often given to people with pancreatic insufficiency and a few other things. And there is long-term study. There are instances where some people who are on this medication have been on it for decades and are kicking along well. So while we can't say yes or no, because that research doesn't exist, at least when it comes to Creon, right, there is evidence that it's not detrimental. And so again, working with a practitioner, and I think, again, to Dr. Varden's point, really understanding the why, because you want to make sure that was a digestive reason that you started it, and not, something else that could be addressed in a different way. Yeah.
And I want to make sure not to skip over his last part of the question on whether we, as the DNA company, offer like parasite or toxin testing and things. And actually, if you are part of one of our programs, our clinicians are able to order tests, ancillary tests, if it is called for in your particular case. So we do have options for a suite of tests, as well as, supplements and other things that can be offered. So, but like direct to consumer, like on our website, no, we don't have anything specific for parasite testing or that. That's more if you are in a program.
Yeah, well rounded. I'm grateful. Dr. Varden is the best at catching the detail, and I'm so very grateful for it, so that I can live up in the cloud with the bigger picture. We're a good 1-2 punch. If either of us punched. Well, actually, she might. She's athletic. I definitely don't. I'd break my thumb because I do it the wrong way. On that delightful note of the vivid vision of me trying to beat someone up and Dr. Varden laughing at me because she's like, "Girl, this is how you do it." Um, I think it's time for us to bid everyone adieu. Dr. Varden, as always, it's delightful to have you here. And to those in the audience, thank you so much for making us part of your journey. Thank you so much for the questions. I hope we spoke to what you were seeking to learn this evening. If not, shoot us an email, shoot us something so that we're able to understand what we're missing, and we can do that next time. And so I think, Dr. Varden, is there anything you want to say before we start to dance our way out?
I want to say thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us and our quirkiness and our geekiness and to give you information that I hope you are taking away some great pearls of information and education. So until then, I bid you all adieu. Have a beautiful rest of your week. And if you don't happen to see us again until after the holidays, have a very blessed, glorious holiday. All right.
Mhm.
Take care.
Oh, mes amis.